My name is Elena Harper. I'm 27 years old, and tonight, over a plate of roast duck and red wine, my mother laughed as my father looked me straight in the eye and said, "What good are you, really?" while my brother Liam snorted so hard wine came out his nose. But what cut deepest wasn't the words. It was the way my mom tilted her head, like she almost felt bad, then raised her glass and added, "Honestly, sweetheart, you've always been the emotional one." Like it explained everything. If you've ever felt invisible at home, or if this story hits close to your heart, please tap like. It lets me know I'm not alone out here. What they didn't know was, the same emotional one had just finished locking down the last piece of a tech acquisition that would tear their world apart. And sometimes I ask myself, how does a girl become invisible in her own family until she's the one holding the knife? It started with the hum of silverware and the low clinking of glasses echoing through the Harper Mansion dining room. The chandelier cast a warm gold haze over the long oak table, and the scent of peppered duck mixed with rosemary floated in the air. Across from me, Liam was retelling a college story for the third time this month, his arm thrown around Dad's chair like he owned the house already. I sat with my fork resting on the edge of my plate, untouched. The wine in my glass was too warm, but I didn't dare move to get ice. Mom had just gotten new crystal glasses, and she'd shrieked last time I clinked one too hard. Liam chuckled, loud and lazy. So I told the investor, if we can't close by Monday, I'm walking. Dad slapped the table, roaring with approval. "That's my boy, no fear." I blinked. I'd written the pitch deck Liam used in that meeting. I even added the mock-ups he bragged about. But I said nothing. Just adjusted my napkin. Inside, something simmered. A quiet, slow burn ache, like stepping barefoot on gravel and pretending it doesn't hurt. "Lena," Dad turned to me, swirling his wine, "still wasting time with that, what do you call it? Your little coding hobby?" He smirked. The same smirk he gave me the night I brought home a National STEM award in high school, and he asked if it came with a paycheck. "I work in data infrastructure," I murmured, voice steadier than my hands. "And it's not a hobby." Dad waved a dismissive hand. "You should have taken the job Liam offered. At least that way you'd be useful." Liam chimed in with a crooked grin. "Come on, Elle. Even Dad's trying to throw you a bone." Something cracked inside me. Not loud, not dramatic, just a clean, silent split, like porcelain under pressure. I turned to Mom, hoping, pleading really, for something, but she just kept buttering her roll, her eyes locked on the bread knife like it was more interesting than any of this. My fingers curled under the table, nails digging into my palm. "I'm fine where I am," I said quietly. Silence. Then Dad chuckled. "Of course you are." I felt the tension in my shoulders, the way my back pressed harder into the mahogany chair. I stared down at my plate. Cut vegetables arranged neatly, untouched duck glistening with sauce. I couldn't tell if I was too hurt to eat or too angry to pretend anymore. Liam tapped his glass with his spoon. "To success," he declared. "Real success." Everyone raised their glasses, even Mom. Mine stayed where it was. I watched their faces, so sure, so smug, and wondered if any of them had ever really seen me, or if I was just another chair in the room. Furniture with a name. "Here's to family," Dad added, tipping his glass toward me like a joke. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. My pulse thudded in my ears. Not rage, something colder. I thought of the years I'd spent trying to earn that seat at the table, the internships, the degrees, the nights coding through migraines, building something that mattered, and none of it had ever been enough. "Excuse me," I said softly. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the polished floor, a screech in the silence. No one stopped me, not even Mom. As I stepped out into the hallway, the glow from the dining room faded behind me. The air smelled of pinewood polish and roses from the garden. My footsteps echoed softly off the marble floor. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step matching the beat of my heartbeat. Upstairs, I slipped into my room, the only place in the mansion that felt like mine. It was barely more than a box crammed between the guest suite and the linen closet, but it had a lock and a desk. And that night I didn't cry. I sat down, opened my laptop, and clicked open a folder labeled Summit. Lines of code blinked back at me, half-written and raw. I stared at them. My mind replayed the laughter, the smirks, the weight of my father's voice calling me pointless. Then I reached for the keyboard, because if I was going to be their afterthought, I'd make sure they regretted it. Still. As my fingers hovered over the keys, a whisper slipped through my mind. What if I'm not strong enough? What if they're right? And then, like a match in the dark, I remembered something. A single sentence. Buried in a textbook I'd read in college, scrawled in red ink in the margin. Sometimes the people who know you least are your own family. I typed the first line of Summit Tech's architecture. The letters glowed. My chest tightened. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was the beginning of something I couldn't stop. Because if I couldn't find a place at their table, I'd build my own empire from scratch and make them watch every step. But what I didn't know, as I sat there under the soft blue desk lamp glow, was that someone had been watching me all along. That night, the silence in my room felt sharper than usual. The hum of my laptop fan buzzed low against the ticking of the vintage wall clock, a gift from Mom when I turned 18. "For your future office," she'd said. Funny how it ended up here, in the smallest room of the house, next to a cracked outlet and peeling paint where the bookshelf leaned crooked. I sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop open, screen bathing my face in pale blue light. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling, not from fear, but something else, anticipation, defiance, a feeling I couldn't name, only feel burning at the base of my spine. I clicked open the file I'd kept hidden under layers of folders and dummy names. Summit Tech, a concept Chloe and I whispered about back in college, late nights over ramen and Red Bull. Back then, it was just a dream, something far off, like stardust you could only stare at. But tonight, it felt tangible. Mine. My cursor blinked, waiting. So was I. And then, without knocking, the door creaked open. "Still up?" Chloe's voice was soft, but there was mischief beneath it. She slipped in like she belonged here. Truth was, she practically did. We'd been inseparable since freshman year, when she hacked the campus Wi-Fi to give us faster download speeds. She was brilliant and dangerous in all the right ways. She flopped onto the floor, chin resting on her palms, gazing up at my screen. "Is that?" she whispered, her voice catching. I nodded. "Yeah, it's time." Her grin widened. "Finally." Chloe sat up and pulled her own laptop out of her backpack. Stickers covered its scratched surface. Build or die, CTRL plus ALT plus Rebel. And one I gave her that said, "Not your tech bro." She booted it up in seconds, fingers flying like she'd been waiting for this moment forever. The glow of both screens lit the room in dual shades, hers bright with code, mine still a skeleton of what could be. "What if they find out?" I asked, not even looking up. The words came out quieter than I intended. Chloe didn't answer right away. She just leaned back, crossed her legs, and looked at me with the kind of calm that only comes when you've already made peace with risk. "Then we make it worth it," she said. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Outside the window, the wind rustled the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The world kept spinning while we built something it hadn't seen yet. But then, a ping. My phone lit up on the nightstand. A message from Dad. "Victor Harper. Meet me in my office first thing tomorrow. We need to discuss your future. Be ready." I stared at the screen. My heart thudded once, twice. Harder, Chloe noticed. "What is it?" I turned the phone toward her. Her expression darkened. "He knows." "No," I said too quickly. "He couldn't. We've been careful." She squinted. "Still? Why now?" I didn't have an answer. Maybe it was coincidence. Or maybe he'd picked up on something. A change in posture. The way I stopped arguing back at dinner. The calm before a storm always made Dad suspicious. "I'll go," I said, locking my phone. "I'll play it cool." Chloe nodded, but she didn't look convinced. I glanced at her fingers, still resting on her keyboard, poised to strike. "What if we actually did this?" I asked quietly. She looked up. "We are." "No, I mean really. Public launch, build fast, secure funding. Get in front of him before he realizes what we've done." Chloe's eyes sparkled. "We'd need a name." "We already have one." She smiled. "Summit Tech," she repeated, like it was a prayer. I stared at the ceiling. The paint had started to peel above my bed, revealing old water stains shaped like clouds. For a moment, I imagined the launch, the headlines, the look on Dad's face. But with that thrill came a flicker of doubt, an old echo. He'll crush you before you get a chance. My stomach twisted. I'm not him, I whispered. I won't be like him. I know, Chloe said. She always knew. But that night, after she left, I sat there in the stillness again. The cursor blinked, my hands motionless. An old memory crawled up my spine, me at 15, showing Dad a prototype I'd made, a basic data sorting app. I'd built it in secret for months. He skimmed it, muttered something about wasting time, and walked away. I never showed him anything again. The next morning came too fast. I walked into the kitchen and found Mom already dressed, stirring her tea with a silver spoon. She didn't look up. Your father's waiting, she said simply. No good morning, no eye contact. Just those words. I swallowed hard and walked past her. Dad's office was like a different country. Mahogany shelves, globe bar cart, leather chairs no one sat in. He stood at the window when I entered, back to me, arms folded. You wanted to talk, I said. He didn't turn around. I've decided it's time you take a real role in the company. That caught me off guard. You're serious? I asked cautiously. Of course, he said, finally turning. But not in the tech department. You'll assist your brother. Learn the business side. I stared at him. You mean be Liam's assistant? Think of it as training. My jaw clenched. I kept my voice steady. I have a degree in computational systems. I've written algorithms Liam doesn't even understand. Exactly, he said. That's not leadership, that's busy work. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but instead I looked him dead in the eye and said, no. His brows lifted, amused. Excuse me? I said no. The word echoed in the room like a slap. He laughed, short, bitter. Don't be foolish, Elena. You've got nothing else. I stepped forward. Then I guess we'll see. And I walked out. I could feel his stare burning holes in my back, but I didn't turn around. Back upstairs, Chloe was already packing up her laptop. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Let's start today. She grinned. Thought you'd never say that. But as we pulled up the code, as the files loaded and the screen came alive with structure and intent, I couldn't shake the cold in my chest, because something had shifted. Victor Harper didn't offer anything unless he was planning to take something first, and as much as I wanted to believe this was my rebellion, what if I had just stepped into his trap? It's strange how betrayal doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it slips in quietly, like fog through an open window. The boardroom smelled like varnish and old paper. Dad had insisted on keeping the original mahogany table from when the company started. Tradition matters, he'd said more than once, his hand grazing the engraved family crest on the backrest of his chair. I stood near the corner, pretending to scroll my phone while Liam pitched another game-changing product. He used words like disruptive and agile, drawing lines on the whiteboard that made no architectural sense. The others in the room nodded along, some scribbled in notebooks. But no one noticed the heat rising in my chest, because that app, the one Liam was reimagining today, it was mine. I built the core algorithm last summer, buried it in the company drive under generic naming, waiting until I could get it vetted. Liam must have found it, repackaged it, and now Dad was applauding him. Brilliant thinking, son, Dad said, clapping Liam on the back. This is the kind of leadership we need. My lips parted, but no sound came out. Instead, I gripped the handle of my tote bag, my nails digging into the leather. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. Behind me, the long glass windows showed our reflection, a father proud, a son smirking, and a daughter ghosting. Again. When the meeting ended, I trailed out into the hallway, hoping for air. The office corridor smelled like lemon cleaner and dust. My heels echoed with every step. I didn't cry, but my fingers trembled as I reached for the elevator button. Then I heard her voice behind me. Elena. I turned. Mom stood there, holding her purse tightly in both hands like a shield. Her makeup looked a little off, like she'd rushed it. She looked tired. Hey, I said, voice hoarse. She stepped closer, but not too close. I thought you were going to speak up in there. I blinked. Why would I? No one listens. Her eyes dropped to the floor. It's not true, you know, she whispered. Your father he doesn't always show it. I gave a small, humorless laugh. Sure. I stepped into the elevator. She didn't follow. As the doors slid shut, I caught her expression. Tight lips, uncertain eyes. Not guilt, not pride. Something in between. When I got home, the mansion was oddly quiet. Dad was out, Liam gone God knows where. I moved through the house like a ghost in my own life, every step brushing against memories I didn't want. The dining room was still set from the night before, plates stacked, silver glinting under the overhead chandelier. I sat down at the far end, alone. That's when I heard the click of the door. Dad walked in, holding a tumbler of something amber. His tie loosened, collar open. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Wanted to talk, he said, voice too calm. I leaned back, arms folded. About? He sat across from me. The distance between us felt enormous. The family firm's future. I stayed quiet. We've been offered a buyout, he continued. $57 million. I blinked, my heart pounded. That's sudden. He took a sip of his drink. Not really. We've been negotiating for months. That stopped me cold. We? He nodded. Me, Liam, a few trusted partners. My mouth went dry. And me? He swirled the glass. You're not on the papers. Not officially. I sat there, frozen. Not officially. The words landed like stones in my gut. But I know, he interrupted gently. You've been around, helping, playing with code. I stared at him, stunned. Playing with code. I boosted your bottom line last quarter, I said, voice rising. He didn't flinch. Elena, this is business. We can't afford idealism right now. I felt my pulse in my throat. My hands were clenched in my lap, nails cutting into skin. You're cutting me out, I whispered. I'm protecting you. That made me laugh, loud and bitter. By making sure I get nothing? He shrugged like it was just math. You still have your little project, don't you? He said, eyes flicking toward the stairs. Chloe something? My blood ran cold. I didn't respond. You should focus on that, he added, rising from the chair. Build something of your own. That's what you want, right? He walked out without waiting for an answer. I stared at the space he left behind. My ears rang, my throat burned. Every breath felt heavier than the last. A memory hit me hard. Me at 12, sitting outside Dad's office, waiting to show him a school science project. He'd brushed past me then, too, muttering about real work. Back then, I told myself he was just busy. Now I knew better. He didn't just underestimate me. He erased me. Upstairs, I slammed the door behind me, laptop open before I even sat down. Chloe was already online. He told me, I typed. They're selling the firm. I get nothing. 3 dots appeared. Then, what? He knows about us, or suspects. Typing again. This changes everything. We need to move faster. I hesitated. Then, I'm in. All in. There was a pause, then a ping. I'm with you. My fingers hovered over the keys. I could feel the weight of everything that had just happened pressing on my shoulders. Dad had written me off, but this wasn't the end. Not even close. And as I stared at the glowing screen, one question pulsed in my head. What if I could turn their rejection into my weapon? It started with a creak. I wasn't even looking for anything. I just wanted space to breathe, to think, to get away from the memory of Dad's voice echoing in my skull. You're not on the papers, not officially. The door to his study was cracked open. A single sliver of lamplight cut across the hallway carpet like a blade. The air smelled like leather and stale bourbon, familiar, bitter. I told myself I wasn't snooping, but my feet moved anyway. Inside, the room looked untouched, almost staged. Shelves lined with business books Dad never read. A locked cabinet I'd never had the key to. The scent of his cologne still clung to the chair's headrest. I stood still, listening for footsteps. Nothing. Then I saw it. A single envelope, yellowed and slightly curled at the edges, stuck between a thick ledger and an old photo album on the bottom shelf. It had my name on it, Elena, in my father's handwriting. But the flap wasn't sealed. My fingers hesitated, hovering just above the paper. My breath felt loud in the room, too loud. I knelt down slowly, knees brushing the hardwood, and gently slid the envelope free. The paper inside was thin, brittle, typed words in all caps, a letter never sent. And then, before I could finish the first line, the sound of boots. The front door slammed shut. I froze. Footsteps thudded across the tile. Dad. He was home. I shoved the letter into the waistband of my jeans, yanked my hoodie over it, and pulled a random book from the shelf to fill the gap. My hands shook as I straightened the spine. The study door creaked again. "Elena?" His voice. Close. Too close. I turned, heart hammering in my throat. "Yeah?" His silhouette filled the doorway, outlined by the hallway light. "What are you doing in here?" I lifted the book. "Just borrowing this." His eyes narrowed. "From my study?" "I thought it was the library," I lied. My voice sounded casual, but I could feel the sweat gathering at the base of my neck. He stepped in, crossed the room slowly, took the book from my hands, and looked at the title, The Art of Corporate Succession. A long pause. Then he chuckled, dry and cruel. "Not your genre." He placed it back on the shelf. I forced a small smile. "I'll get something from upstairs." As I stepped past him, he didn't move out of the way. I had to brush his shoulder. His eyes stayed on me the whole time, like he knew something, but didn't have proof. Yet. Back in my room, I locked the door and pulled the letter from my waistband with shaking hands. The page was faintly creased, but legible. At the top, to Elena, only if I can't explain in person. The first few lines were confusing. Financial references, family business structures, but then something odd, a line that didn't make sense. "The trust was never meant to divide you and Liam. It was a mistake not telling you earlier." Trust? I stared at the words, heart picking up speed. There was a trust fund? And I was part of it? But then, why hide this? Why never send the letter? Why pretend I didn't exist in the business at all? I read the next line. "Your mother thought it best we keep it private." That stopped me cold. Mom? She'd always played it safe. Always stood to the side when Dad raised his voice. But this felt deeper. Older. I read it again. The sentence didn't explain her silence, but it pointed at something she wasn't saying. I wanted to scream. Instead, I ran my fingers along the bottom of the page. There was no date, no signature, just a final sentence. "If you've found this before I told you, please forgive me." But I didn't, not yet. The next morning, Chloe arrived early. She burst into my room without knocking, breathless and already pulling out her laptop. "I've been up all night," she said. "We can scale Summit in half the time. I found a grant. Private, silent investor. Tech for good angle." I blinked, still groggy from lack of sleep. The letter was folded beneath my pillow like a secret I wasn't ready to share. She paused. "You okay?" I nodded, too fast. Her eyes scanned me. "Liar!" I sighed, sitting up. "I found something, in Dad's office." That got her attention. She sat cross-legged at the edge of my bed. I reached under the pillow and handed her the letter. She read it silently, brows furrowing with each line. When she was done, she looked up. "Why would he write this and never send it?" I shrugged. Maybe he changed his mind, or maybe Mom made him. She stared at the page again. "Elena, this could be important, like legally important, or just another manipulation." I stood, pacing. My socks slid slightly on the hardwood, the morning chill seeping up through the floor. "But what if it's real?" Chloe asked. "What if there's money? Ownership?" "I don't know," I said quietly, "but I need to find out." There was a long pause. Chloe closed her laptop. "We need help," she said. "A lawyer. Someone who won't rat." I nodded slowly, then added, "And I need to talk to my mom." "Think she'll tell you the truth?" I hesitated. "I think she'll lie first, but maybe not twice." That afternoon, I found her alone in the greenhouse, trimming back the lavender. The air smelled sharp and earthy, filled with sunlight and the slow hum of bees. She didn't look up as I approached. "I found a letter," I said. She paused, pruning shears hovering midair. "In Dad's study." Still no reply. "It had my name on it, mentioned a trust, and you." She lowered the shears slowly. Then she looked at me. Really looked. Her eyes were darker than I remembered, heavier. "I didn't want you to get hurt," she said. My voice caught. "So you erased me instead?" "It wasn't like that." "Then explain." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Silence. I waited. But she just turned back to the lavender, snipping without looking. That was her answer. And as I walked away, something inside me hardened. The kind of silence that doesn't protect, it poisons. Later that night, I stared out my bedroom window, lights of the mansion flickering behind me. I thought about the letter, the trust, my mom's silence, Dad's smirk. And for the first time, I didn't just want to prove them wrong. I wanted answers, real ones, even if I had to burn the whole thing down to get them. But I wasn't alone anymore. Downstairs, Chloe texted 2 words: "Let's begin." The rain started just after midnight. It wasn't a storm, not yet, just a slow, persistent tapping on the warehouse roof, like fingers drumming a warning I hadn't asked for. I stood beneath the exposed metal beams, my arms crossed over my chest as the chill seeped through my jacket. Chloe was at my side, pacing, her boots scuffing against the cracked concrete floor. The scent of motor oil and damp cardboard clung to everything. Shadows danced across the rust-stained walls from a single bare bulb overhead. And then I heard him. Heavy footsteps, deliberate and slow, echoed from the far end of the space. Mr. Grayson appeared from behind a stack of wooden crates, trench coat soaked, his salt and pepper hair plastered to his forehead. He carried a briefcase in one hand and didn't smile. "You're late," Chloe muttered, narrowing her eyes. He didn't answer, just walked up and placed the briefcase on an overturned crate between us. I studied him carefully, his jaw tight, movements controlled, like a man used to dealing in secrets. Victor had worked with him years ago on some private acquisitions. Chloe and I had reached out through an encrypted channel last week. He was the only one willing to meet off the books. "You understand the terms?" he asked, voice gravelly. "We do," I said, stepping forward. "I want to expand Summit Tech's reach, fast, quietly, without triggering family alarms." He opened the case with a click. Inside, a stack of documents, contracts, term sheets, legal shields I barely understood. But Chloe had gone through them all twice. She gave me a subtle nod. I reached for the pen. My fingers hovered for a second. Then I signed. A rush went through me. Not adrenaline, something deeper. Like I'd just crossed a line no one could walk me back from. Grayson snapped the case shut. "It's done," he said. "You'll have the new accounts by morning, but a word of caution." He looked at me now, really looked. "You're not the only one making moves." Chloe stiffened. "What does that mean?" He glanced toward the entrance, voice low. "There's another bidder, someone who caught wind of your code base. They're circling." My throat went dry. "Who?" He didn't answer, just handed me a folded slip of paper and turned to leave. "Careful who you trust," he said, before disappearing into the dark. I unfolded the note. No name, just a single word. Internal. My heart dropped. That night, Chloe and I drove in silence. Rain blurred the windshield, the headlights barely slicing through the fog. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. "Internal," she whispered. "That could mean family." I didn't respond, because I was already thinking it. Liam. Back at the mansion, I waited until the halls were empty, then slipped into the kitchen and grabbed an old bottle of water from the back of the fridge, one of the glass ones Dad used for guests. I didn't drink it. I just needed something cold to hold. I sat in the dark dining room, bottle sweating in my hands, mind racing. What if Liam had caught on? What if he was feeding information to someone? Or worse, trying to buy Summit from under me? It didn't make sense. But that didn't stop the knot forming in my stomach. Suddenly, I heard footsteps above, floorboards creaking, then soft murmurs, a door opening, closing. I stood, bottle still clutched tight. Curiosity pulled me down the hallway. At the top of the stairs, I paused. Dad's study door was ajar, light spilling out. I crept closer. My bare feet barely made a sound against the polished wood. Inside, Liam stood by the desk, holding Dad's phone. He wasn't speaking, but he was reading something, intently. Then he typed a short message, hit send, and placed the phone back exactly where it was. I backed away before he saw me. In my room, I tried to breathe. Liam, the idiot golden boy who never coded a day in his life, Why would he be snooping around Dad's phone? Unless he wasn't as clueless as he seemed. Chloe texted me then. All systems ready, phase 2 greenlit. I stared at the message, still shaken. I typed back. Someone's watching. It might be him. Typing bubble. Then we moved faster. But something nagged at me. Not just Liam's sudden curiosity or the word internal. Something deeper. Earlier, when I signed the papers with Grayson, he didn't flinch at the name Summit Tech. He didn't ask why we'd chosen it. Didn't mention its potential. He acted like he already knew. I replayed his expression, the caution, the weight of his silence. A thought slid into my mind like a whisper. What if he already knew who the rival bidder was? And worse, what if he was working both sides? I couldn't prove it. Not yet, but I felt it. In my gut. In the way his eyes lingered a second too long on the contract. In how he said nothing about Chloe. As if he knew more than he let on. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay there with my laptop open, fingers brushing the edge of the keyboard, watching code flicker on the screen. Each line felt like a fuse. Chloe was downstairs prepping the backup drive. We'd made it look like a decoy, just in case. But even she didn't know what I was thinking now. I wasn't just trying to outrun my father anymore. I was starting to wonder, was the real enemy already inside the house? Dad's office was quiet in that way that made your skin itch. The walls absorbed sound like secrets. Thick mahogany panels, deep green drapes drawn halfway. Dust floated in a shaft of afternoon light, catching on the corners of his leather-bound books and the edge of a silver paperweight shaped like a lion. His desk, polished to a shine, looked untouched, like it had never known work, just performance. I stood in the doorway, unsure if I was walking into a trap or a test. "Come in," he said without looking up. His voice had that syrupy calm he saved for negotiations, that tone that pretended warmth while checking for knives under the table. I stepped in slowly, closing the door behind me. He gestured to the chair across from him, the one Mom used during family meetings, the ones where I was always looped in later. I didn't sit. Instead, I placed my hands behind my back and watched him shuffle through a stack of papers like I wasn't even there. Finally, he looked up. "Elena," he said. "I've been thinking." That alone was enough to make me brace. "I may have underestimated you." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He leaned back, lacing his fingers together. "Liam's made some missteps lately." I kept my expression still, but inside my heart jumped. Missteps? Or did someone finally notice the holes in his numbers? "You've shown initiative," Dad continued. "Discretion, loyalty." I almost laughed out loud. Instead, I tilted my head. "Since when do you value any of those from me?" He gave me a tight smile. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for." He reached into a drawer and slid out a manila envelope. Inside, a legal contract. "Here," he said, pushing it across the desk. "This makes it official. Your stake in the Harper Group." I stared at it. Everything in me screamed to grab it, read every line, pick it apart with Chloe word by word. But instead, I said nothing, just watched him. He leaned forward, voice low. "No tricks. Just a formal acknowledgement. You deserve that much." My fingers hovered over the envelope. I wasn't ready to trust it, but I also couldn't afford not to read it. He watched me closely. His gaze didn't flinch, didn't twitch, not like Liam's. That's when I realized something. He wasn't manipulating me, not in the usual way. He was impressed, or trying to be. I opened the envelope slowly. The paper inside was crisp, still warm from the printer. My name in bold letters, share terms outlined. It looked clean, too clean. I flipped to the signature page. His name was already there, dated. I looked up. "Why now?" He didn't blink. "Because I want the family aligned when the sale finalizes." There it was, the hook. This wasn't a peace offering. It was leverage. "I need everyone on the same page," he added, "and that includes you." A pause, just long enough for it to sting. "It always has," he lied. I didn't argue. I just signed. And with that stroke of ink, I felt the floor tilt under me, because I knew I had just made a mistake. Not 10 minutes after I walked out of his office, Chloe found me in the garage. She was pacing beside the car, eyes wild. "You signed what?" I held the contract in my hand like a dead thing. "He made it look legit." "Of course he did," she snapped. That's the point. That's his move. I said nothing, because she was right. I felt it the second the ink dried. She snatched the papers, scanning them fast. Her mouth moved without sound, eyes narrowing. Wait, she flipped back a page. Look at this clause. Pending internal consolidation. Elena, that means he can reclassify any stake not attached to voting rights. You signed your shares into his holding pool. My blood went cold. What? She pointed harder. He just took your leverage. You have equity, but no say. My knees weakened, and I sat down hard on the car's bumper. I walked into it. No, she said firmly, crouching in front of me. He set you up. I clenched the contract so tight it crumpled in my fist. All this time I thought I was moving ahead, calculating, careful, but he'd been 2 steps ahead like always. And worse, he'd smiled while doing it. I looked at Chloe. What do we do? We pivot, she said. You still have Summit. You still have the data. She stood, already reaching for her laptop. But we need to dig deeper. If he's hiding terms in your contract, what else is buried? That night we tore through old files, printouts, emails, even the archive backup of the company server Chloe had cloned months ago. And somewhere in the mess, something strange emerged. A flagged document hidden in a subfolder labeled Client Drafts. It was a scanned image, a will, but not just any will. The header read, Addendum, Harper Family Trust, and the signature, Victor Harper. The date was 3 years old, but the terms were very different. In this version, the trust divided the company equally, between me and Liam. There were no internal consolidations, no transfer rights, no shadow ownership. I stared at it, my hands trembling. This was what Dad didn't want me to see. This was what the letter hinted at. Chloe zoomed in on the signature. It's real, she said quietly, but it was never filed. He must have changed it later, quietly. Then this proves everything, I whispered, that he planned to cut me out. Chloe's voice turned sharp. Worse, he forged the current terms to make it seem like you never mattered. A silence stretched between us. Then she said, We need help, legal help. I nodded, but my eyes were fixed on the screen. Because the document had a footer, one that listed not just witnesses, but a notary. And one of the names was Mom's. My pulse skipped. She knew. All this time, she knew. I couldn't stop staring at her name. There it was, printed at the bottom of the will addendum. Sophie Harper, not just a witness, not just a passive shadow. She had notarized the document, signed it, stamped it with legitimacy. All this time, I thought she was just afraid. But maybe she wasn't silent. Maybe she was complicit. Chloe sat cross-legged on my bed, chewing her thumbnail, the glow of the laptop screen flickering across her face. I could see the exact moment she decided not to say what she was thinking. I beat her to it. She knew, I said, voice raw. Chloe hesitated. Maybe she had no choice. I let out a laugh, sharp, bitter. She had a pen, she signed. That's not a hostage, that's a partner. The room fell quiet. The ticking of the clock on my wall felt louder than usual. The air tasted like old dust and cheap printer ink. My thoughts raced back. Every family dinner, every empty glance from Mom when Dad spoke over me, every time she looked away instead of speaking up. And I remembered a night I hadn't thought of in years. I was 16. There had been a fight, one of the bad ones. I had called out Liam for lying about his GPA, and Dad had shouted until the veins in his neck popped. He told me I was jealous, vindictive. Not like your brother. After, I found Mom in the hallway, folding towels with perfect creases like nothing had happened. I had asked her then, "Why don't you ever defend me?" She had looked up, eyes tired, and said only, "It's better this way." Back then I thought she meant safer. Now, I wasn't so sure. I snapped out of it when Chloe touched my arm. "Elena," she said low. "There's more." I leaned in. She flipped the screen to show a hidden ledger we hadn't noticed, tucked beneath encrypted server backups. It had Liam's name on it. "Accounts," she said. "Offshore, shells." I blinked. "He's laundering?" She nodded slowly. "Looks like he's been moving small transfers every quarter. Quiet, but consistent. And look, some are routed through vendors tied to Grayson." My breath caught. Wait, Grayson's connected to Liam? Chloe zoomed in on the transfer metadata. Same holding firm, different front names, but yeah, it's there. I ran my hands through my hair, heart pounding. Why would Grayson warn us about a rival bidder if it's Liam? Chloe's voice dropped. Because maybe he wasn't warning you. Maybe he was testing you. The room tilted under me. I thought I was 10 moves ahead, but I hadn't even seen the board. We stayed up most of the night after that, cross-referencing names, tracing back transactions. It felt like unraveling a knot made of barbed wire. Every layer we pulled stung worse than the last. By dawn, we had a web, sloppy in parts but clear enough. Victor, Liam, Grayson, all connected, and Mom, somewhere in the silence between them. Later that morning, I slipped into the kitchen just as Dad was leaving for a conference call. He didn't even glance at me, just sipped his coffee and walked out the door like I was invisible. I waited until the house was still. Then I found Mom in the sunroom, pruning orchids. The air was warm, quiet, thick with the floral scent of potting soil and vanilla candles. She hummed softly, an old tune I didn't recognize. Her shears clicked rhythmically. I stood there, watching her for a second too long. She finally looked up. "Elena," she said with a small smile. "You startled me." I stepped closer. "Do you remember a document you signed 3 years ago?" I asked. "Dad's will, an addendum." Her eyes didn't flinch, but her hands did. The shears clicked once more, then stilled. "I sign a lot of papers," she said carefully. "You notarized it." Still no reaction. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a printout of the scan. "I found this on the old server. You signed it. You witnessed the equal split between me and Liam, but that's not what's in place now." She didn't take the paper, just stared at it. "I never saw the final version," she said finally. "That was the final version, until it wasn't." She blinked slowly. "Victor said he changed it later, privately." "And you didn't think to ask why?" Her voice dropped. "I trusted him." I let the silence hang heavy. She looked down at the orchid, fingers brushing over a new bloom. "You don't understand," she whispered. "It was never about sides. It was about keeping peace." "No," I said. "It was about keeping quiet." She didn't argue, and somehow that hurt more. I left the room without another word. That night, I returned to my own space, my own battle lines. Chloe was already waiting, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, caffeine clutched in both hands. "We have enough," she said, "to blow this open." "But not without risk," I murmured. "Always risk." She clicked a key, and the room lit with diagrams, receipts, digital trails. I stared at the chaos we had uncovered, and then something caught my eye. A name. From an old vendor ledger, L. Harper Tech Consultants. "Wait," I whispered. "That's Liam's dummy firm." Chloe nodded. "What about it?" I squinted at the invoice. "The project name. This was my algorithm, the one he pitched last month." She froze. "No way." I tapped the screen. "That's the internal code I wrote back in January." "You never submitted that version to the main drive," she said. I looked up, heart suddenly pounding. "No, I didn't." Which meant, "He stole it from my laptop," I said. "He had access." Chloe's voice was barely above a whisper. "He's not just complicit, he's the thief." We stared at each other. Then the sound of a car door slammed outside. I moved to the window and peeked through the blinds. Liam, back early. His face was tight, focused, not the smug grin he wore at the dinner table. "What's he doing here?" Chloe asked. "I don't know," I said, "but we're about to find out." The front door slammed shut like a warning shot. Liam's footsteps echoed down the hallway, sharp, uneven, faster than usual. Chloe and I locked eyes. Her fingers hovered over her laptop, still glowing with the evidence we'd just uncovered. My breath caught in my throat. I stood. "Get the drive, hide it." She didn't hesitate. She yanked the flash drive from her port and stuffed it into the lining of her boot, covering it with the cuff of her jeans. Too late. A knock, firm and fast, rattled my bedroom door. "Elena?" Liam called. His voice was calm. Too calm. "You in there?" I swallowed, forcing the shake out of my hands. Chloe grabbed her phone and disappeared into my closet without a word. I opened the door, blocking the view behind me with my body. "What's up?" I asked, faking surprise. He tilted his head. "Got a minute?" My stomach twisted. "Now?" "Yeah," he said, pushing gently past me. "We need to talk." I shut the door behind him, slow and silent. He looked around my room. At the books stacked in messy piles, my unmade bed, the humming laptop still open on a code window. "You've been busy," he said, eyes scanning everything too quickly. I sat on the edge of my bed. "What's this about?" He leaned against my desk, arms folded. "Dad's getting nervous. The sale is closing soon, and he's worried you might try to stir things up." I blinked. "Me?" He smiled. "You've always been the wild card." His tone was playful, but his eyes weren't. "You know," he continued, "Grayson said something interesting the other day." I felt my shoulders stiffen. He mentioned Summit Tech, said there was a surprising amount of traction for a startup so new. I didn't respond. I just watched his hands. One tapped against the wood of my desk, light, rhythmic, too steady. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" he asked. I tilted my head. "You spying on startups now?" He chuckled. "I just think it's funny how some things echo familiar architecture." There it was. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. He pushed off the desk, stepped closer, his voice dropping to something tighter. "Look, I don't care what you're building, I really don't. But don't screw up the sale. You have no idea what you're playing with." I stood, matching his posture. "You mean like company funds being rerouted through a shell firm? That kind of thing?" His face twitched, just once, barely enough to catch. "I'd be careful," he said, voice flat now. "You might not like what you find." Then he left, and I let out a breath that burned on the way up. Chloe emerged from the closet, clutching her phone. "I got the whole thing," I nodded. "We'll use it if we need to." But my mind was spinning, because Grayson's name kept surfacing, and I still didn't know who he was really working for. We needed answers. The next night we met Grayson again, this time in the back of an industrial cafe downtown after hours. The lights buzzed overhead. The smell of burnt espresso lingered in the air. A single bulb flickered above our booth like a warning. He was already there, sipping something dark. "You're pushing the timeline," he said without looking up. "Liam knows," I said, "and he's not acting alone." Grayson didn't blink. "No one acts alone." I sat across from him. Chloe remained standing, arms crossed. "Why are you helping us?" I asked. He looked up slowly. "Because I don't like unfinished business." "Meaning?" He leaned in. "Victor burned me once. You weren't the only person promised something he took back." His voice had an edge now. Not just resentment, history. Chloe slid into the booth beside me. "You warned us about a rival bidder. That bidder is Liam, and you're working both sides." Grayson smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I never said I wasn't." My chest tightened. "So what do you want?" "I want the company out of Victor's hands. I don't care who takes it, as long as it's not him." "And Liam?" I asked. Grayson's expression darkened. "He's just a symptom, not the disease." That hung in the air. Then he slid a flash drive across the table. "What's this?" Chloe asked. "Insurance. Records Victor doesn't know I still have. Contracts, internal memos, some less than legal accounts. Use it wisely." I picked it up slowly. "And the catch?" He stood. "If you burn me, I burn everyone. Choose carefully who you expose. And Elena," he looked at me with something between warning and respect, "you're not as invisible as you think." Then he walked out. We sat in silence for a moment. Chloe opened the drive on her laptop right there in the booth. There were hundreds of files. Emails between Victor and foreign investors, fake vendor contracts, even one flagged draft of the forged trust, dated after the original had been notarized. It was everything we needed. And then some. Later, back at the mansion, I walked past Liam's room. His door was cracked open. Inside, he was pacing, phone to his ear. "No. We move now," he hissed. "I don't care what Grayson said. Elena's getting too close." A pause. Then, "She won't stop unless we stop her." I didn't wait to hear more. I slipped into my room and locked the door. Chloe was already setting up the backup servers. "Liam's planning something," I said. She nodded. "So are we." But a question dug into me like a splinter I couldn't ignore. If Grayson's helping me, why did his name appear on one of Liam's contracts? I opened the file again. Vendor G Holdings Limited. Signatory L. Harper. But the witness? Not Grayson, someone else. Mom, again, her name, again, and this time on Liam's ledger. The sun dipped low behind the hills, bleeding orange and gold across the dining room walls. The long oak table gleamed under the soft candlelight, polished to perfection, like the night itself had been staged. Dad sat at the head, wine glass in hand, his tie slightly loosened. Liam reclined 3 chairs down, spinning a silver fork between his fingers like a child waiting to be congratulated. Ma moved around the table, laying down folded napkins like nothing in this house was rotting beneath its surface. But it was. Every movement, every polite smile was a performance, a cover. I stood in the doorway, watching them, watching this last act of the old script play out. Chloe had dropped me off 20 minutes earlier. She hadn't said a word the whole ride over, just squeezed my hand once and whispered, "You've got this." She stayed outside, just in case. I stepped in. Dad looked up first. "Elena." Just in time. I walked slowly to my seat, directly across from Liam. His eyes flicked to mine, unreadable. I took my time unfolding the napkin. "I heard we're celebrating," I said, voice light. "Big sale tonight, isn't it?" Liam smirked. "You could say that." The wine in my glass shimmered red, like a warning. I didn't touch it. "So," Dad began, raising his glass, "to Harper Enterprises, a legacy built on trust, resilience, and silence," I cut in. The room froze. Dad's hand lowered, just slightly. "I'm sorry," he said. I leaned forward. "To trust, right? Like the trust you altered without telling anyone? Or the company funds Liam rerouted through dummy firms under Mom's name?" Liam's fork clattered against his plate. Mom's hand jerked as she lowered the salad bowl. Dad's voice went cold. "What exactly are you accusing us of?" I smiled slow. "I'm not accusing, I'm declaring." I reached into my bag and slid a flash drive across the table. "Summit Tech now owns a majority share in the buyer consortium, meaning this sale you've orchestrated?" I locked eyes with him. "You're not selling the company, Dad. You're selling it to me." The silence was alive. Liam sat up straighter. "You're bluffing. Try me." I opened my laptop. With a tap, the screen lit up, showing the signed transfer documents from Grayson, the verification codes from the offshore partner firm, and the time-stamped recordings of Liam's shady dealings. Chloe had bundled everything perfectly. Dad pushed his chair back, slow and steady. "This is illegal." I didn't blink. "Only if you can prove it." He moved to stand, but I rose first. "You discredited me, cut me out, mocked my work, and still, here I am, holding the very thing you thought you could hide." His voice dropped to a hiss. "This won't hold. You're just a child playing business." "Funny," I said. "I thought you liked child prodigies, at least when they cover for your mistakes." Liam's voice broke through. "You don't know what you're doing, Elena. You're going to blow up the entire firm." "You already did that," I said, turning to him. "You stole my code. You forged deals under Mom's signature. You lied. And you hid." "I did what I had to," he snapped. "You always played victim, but you were never strong enough to take real risks." "That's where you're wrong." I stepped forward. My hands weren't shaking anymore. "You took risks with other people's work, other people's names. I built something without yours." His jaw clenched. Then for the first time, Mom spoke. "Enough." We all turned. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her, but her voice held weight it had never dared to before. "Elena has proof, and we all know she's right." Dad's head turned slowly toward her. "You knew?" he asked. She nodded. "I saw the original will. I notarized it. And I saw what you did to it." He looked stunned, genuinely, for the first time in years. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked. Her voice cracked just slightly. "Because I thought you'd fix it. I kept waiting." The silence wrapped around us like a noose. Then Dad turned back to me. "You think you've won?" "No," I said. "I think I've just started." I tapped one more key. The screen changed, a live feed. Behind Dad, Liam, and Mom, on the far wall, a projector lit up. Emails, names, paper trails, the family secrets exposed. Dad's mouth opened, then shut. Liam looked like he'd been slapped. I leaned in. "I had one question, just one." They all stared. "How does it feel," I said, "knowing the person you called worthless just ended your legacy?" Liam shot up, knocking over his chair. "You little—" Dad raised a hand. "Sit down." But Liam didn't. His face twisted into something I didn't recognize, something dangerous. "This isn't over," he said. I smiled. "No, Liam, it's just beginning." Outside, Chloe texted one word, "Ready?" I hit send. And as the projector faded, one more alert lit up my screen. An incoming message from an encrypted sender. The subject line, "You don't know the full story." The message sat on my screen like a ghost refusing to leave. Subject, "You don't know the full story." Sender, unknown, encrypted. Attachment, 1 PDF. I hesitated. Chloe, still seated beside me in the glow of the now darkened dining room, leaned in. "Do you recognize the address?" she asked, her voice hushed. I shook my head. The house around us had gone silent. Liam had stormed upstairs. Mom retreated to the kitchen in a daze. And Dad, he'd just disappeared, slipped into the hallway like a shadow disintegrating. But the damage had already been done. I clicked. The file opened slowly. Pages scanned from something legal, aged, annotated in the margins. And then I saw it. A second will. Signed, stamped, backdated. I froze. It wasn't just different from the forged version I'd found earlier. It was deliberate. Malicious. Victor Harper leaves full control of Harper Enterprises to one heir, Liam Harper. My heart stopped. Chloe leaned closer, reading faster now. "No," she whispered. "This can't be real." But it was. Every page, every line, detailed, strategically crafted, with one goal, to make me disappear, permanently. My name didn't even appear in the document, not once. I scrolled to the final page, and there it was, Victor's signature and Sophie Harper's, Mom, again. But this time, next to the witness line, a third name, Grayson. Everything inside me went still. Grayson had claimed he was burned, claimed he wanted revenge. But he was there, at the beginning. I stared at the screen, the room blurring. "I don't get it," Chloe said, her voice tight. "He gave us evidence. Why expose himself?" I could barely speak. "Because he thought I'd never see this." I closed the file and stood. My legs felt heavy, like my body had suddenly aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "I need to talk to her," I said. "Your mom?" Chloe asked. I nodded. She was in the greenhouse, where she always went to disappear when things cracked beyond repair. The air was warm in there, thick with humidity and the sweet sharpness of jasmine. She didn't flinch when I entered, just clipped a dead stem from an orchid and said, "I figured you'd come." I stepped closer, not bothering to hide my shaking hands. "How long have you known?" I asked. She placed the shears down gently. "About the sale?" "No, about the will, the second one, the real one." A pause. Then she looked at me. "Since the day he wrote it." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. "You signed it." "I did." I almost laughed. "Why?" She picked up a watering can and began pouring it over a row of violet petals. The soil hissed softly. "Because I thought it would protect you." I blinked, stunned. "Protect me? From what?" "Victor," she said simply. "He was going to cut you out anyway. He told me if I didn't witness it, he'd do it illegally. Without backup, without safeguards." Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. "So you helped him instead." "I thought—" She stopped, took a breath. "I thought if I stayed close to it, I could at least make sure you didn't get crushed." I couldn't stop the tremble in my voice. "You could have told me." I didn't know how. I stepped back, cold now despite the warmth of the greenhouse. "You didn't protect me," I said. "You buried me." She flinched like I'd struck her. I left. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves rustled violently. The sky was shifting, deep gray rolling in from the west. By the time I reached the front door, Chloe was there. "We need to talk," she said, urgency in her voice. "What now?" I asked, exhausted. She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot, an internal memo, from Victor, to the board. "Effective immediately, Harper Enterprises will shift to a restricted control model. Ownership consolidation pending." My stomach dropped. "He's trying to lock you out, before the transition completes." "I own Summit," I said. "He can't touch that." She shook her head. "Not Summit, the trust. The company's legal lineage. He's revoking your family status in the articles. That's not even legal. He's gambling, it won't matter in court." I stared at the text on the screen, numb. "He's still 2 steps ahead," I whispered. Chloe's voice hardened. "Then we need to take the next step. Hit him where it hurts." I nodded slowly. "What are you thinking?" she asked. I looked up at the mansion behind me. The windows glowed like eyes, watching, waiting. "We leaked the documents," I said. "All of them?" I nodded. "Emails, forged wills, internal laundering, everything." Chloe paused. "Even the ones with your mom's name?" I hesitated. My chest tightened, then, yes. The truth wasn't clean. It never had been. It was messy, brutal, complicated, but it was mine. Later that night, I uploaded the packet to a secure server. Anonymous, untraceable. The press would get it first, then regulators, then the board. The fall would be slow, public. I wouldn't need to swing the sword. They'd hand it to each other. I sat back, staring at the upload bar as it crawled toward 100%. And then, another ping. Incoming call. Unknown number. I stared. Let it ring once, twice, then answered. A man's voice, distorted, masked, came through the line. "You're playing with fire, Elena." My blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been watching." The line clicked, dead. I turned to Chloe, but before I could say anything, another notification lit the screen. A video file, no name, no message, just one line beneath it. "You missed something." The video loaded slowly, too slowly. Chloe and I sat frozen on the floor of my bedroom, faces lit only by the laptop screen as the first blurry frame came into focus. Time-stamped 5 years ago, Harper Enterprises boardroom. No sound at first, just flickering, grainy footage. Dad, Liam, and someone else, cropped out of frame. Then, a familiar voice. Mom's. "I still don't agree with this, Victor." "I didn't ask for agreement," Dad replied. Then another voice. Mine. At least, a younger version of it. "Why can't I be in the meeting?" "You're not ready," Dad snapped. "Go upstairs." I sucked in a breath. I remembered that day now, the day they finalized the first sale pitch, the day I was told I'd interrupt the flow. But the part that hadn't stayed with me until now was the way Mom's voice trembled afterward. "She'll find out eventually." Victor's response chilled me to my core. "Not if we erase her from the minutes." The video glitched, then cut out. I sat there, heart thudding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "He started erasing me that early," I whispered. Chloe didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because this wasn't just about legal tricks anymore. It was psychological warfare. For years they'd decided who I was allowed to be, and now that I'd taken something back, they were unraveling. But what scared me more than Dad's manipulation was how long Mom let it happen. The next morning, the headlines exploded. Corporate heiress dismantles empire from within. Victor Harper under investigation for forgery, fraud. Leaked files reveal twisted web of power, control, and deception. By noon, board members were resigning. By sunset, Harper stock had dropped 27%, and by midnight, Summit Tech's servers crashed from the surge in traffic. Chloe sat across from me in our co-working space, hair pulled into a messy bun, 2 empty coffee cups beside her. "You just became the most feared founder in Seattle," she said, smirking. I exhaled, half laughing. "I don't feel it." "You will." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're not done yet. Meet me at the estate, 9 p.m. Come alone." "Mom," I stared at the screen. I didn't trust it, but I had to know. The estate was quiet when I arrived. No security, no staff. Just the hollow echo of my boots on the marble floors and the faint hum of the chandelier above. I found her in the study, Dad's study. She stood at the desk, not sitting. Her hands rested on the wood like she needed it to stand upright. "Thank you for coming," she said without turning. "I didn't come for thanks." She nodded, slowly. "I watched the video," I said. "I assumed you would. You helped him erase me." Her shoulders dropped. "I let him," she admitted. "That's different." "No," I said. "It's worse." She finally turned. Tears glimmered at the corners of her eyes, but didn't fall. "I thought staying close to him would protect you," she said, "but I ended up helping him destroy you. You watched him strip me out of the trust. You signed the second will. I also leaked the first one." That stopped me. "What?" She reached into the drawer and pulled out an envelope. Inside, photocopies, the first will, the real one, the one she had notarized years ago. "I sent it to Chloe 3 weeks ago, anonymously. My thoughts spun. Chloe hadn't told me the source, only that it had surfaced. "You still lied," I said. "You let me think you were on his side." "Would you have trusted me if I told you then?" I didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. I wouldn't have. She stepped around the desk and held out a folded document. I opened it slowly. Consultant agreement. Summit Tech position, senior advisor. Signed, Sophie Harper. "You're offering me a job?" I asked. "I'm asking for a second chance," she said. I looked at her, not the mother I remembered from school pickups or polite brunches, but the one who'd stood silently behind my father like a ghost. Only now her hands weren't trembling. She stood tall, unapologetic, and maybe ready. "I'll think about it," I said. She smiled just slightly. "That's more than I deserve." I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, she spoke again. "There's one more thing," she said. I turned. She hesitated. Then, "There may be someone else." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "A name came up in the old trust paperwork," she said. "An account tied to the family, sealed. It wasn't yours. It wasn't Liam's." I took a step back. "Who?" She shook her head. "I don't know, but the initials were EH. That's me." "No," she said. "The date predates your birth." The room swayed slightly. "What are you saying?" I asked. Her voice was almost a whisper. "You might not be the only Harper who got erased." I left without saying another word. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, the sky smeared with stars and something heavier. I sat in the car, gripping the wheel. Somewhere behind me, a family was crumbling, but ahead, a mystery I didn't even know existed. 6 months later, the Harper mansion didn't feel haunted anymore. The rooms were quieter, not empty, just less tense, like something had finally exhaled after holding its breath too long. Sunlight spilled across the polished wood floors of the new office we'd converted out of Dad's old study. The Lionhead paperweight was gone, replaced by a ceramic mug with Chloe's initials and a Summit Tech banner on the far wall. It still felt surreal sometimes, seeing my company's name hanging where his legacy used to loom. I stood at the window, watching Liam carry in a box of folders, arms heavy, expression sheepish. Chloe followed behind him, casually sipping her 4th espresso of the day. "You sure you want him here?" she muttered as she passed. "He's on a very tight leash," I said. "Consultant status only." Chloe smirked, then disappeared down the hallway. Liam set the box down, stretching his back with a grimace. "I'm still not convinced you didn't hire me out of spite." I raised an eyebrow. "Spite is a bonus. You're good with vendor contracts, when you're not hiding money." He gave a dry laugh. "It wasn't perfect between us, but it was something." He'd come to me 2 months ago after the investigation ended and the board cleaned house. For once, he didn't come with a plan, just regret. A strange, clumsy kind. We weren't healed, but we weren't at war. Across the house, I heard Mom's voice. She was on a support call, part of the financial restoration group she'd started after stepping away from Victor for good. The day she signed her resignation from the Harper estate was the first time I saw her stand upright without flinching. Some things break, others bend until they reshape. I sat down at the new desk, fingertips brushing the edge. Chloe entered again, tossing a flash drive on the surface. "Press conference files. You still want to go through with this?" I nodded. "It's time." The press already knew what had happened, but they didn't know why I stayed. That wasn't about revenge. That was about repair. I clicked open the speech I'd written. Nothing grand. Just the truth. Victor Harper was living quietly in a coastal property now. He'd negotiated his way out of prison with a series of corporate disclosures and non-compete agreements. The empire he built didn't survive, but his name still floated in finance circles, like a cautionary tale nobody wanted to touch. I didn't speak to him anymore. Not out of hatred, out of peace. He made his choices. And now, so had I. The screen blinked. A reminder popped up. Press call in 2 hours. Chloe lingered in the doorway. "After this, what happens?" I looked around the room, at the light, at the stacks of launch binders, at the messy whiteboard behind her with half-coated frameworks for the new Summit line. "We build," I said. A pause. Then she smiled. "Damn right we do." Later that evening, we gathered in the dining room again. Same chandelier, same long table. But the people had changed. No formality, no forced hierarchy, just a table set for dinner. I raised my glass. To new starts, Liam raised his. And unexpected second chances, Mom joined. And learning when to finally speak up. Chloe just clinked her glass against mine. To being underestimated, and then over-delivering. Laughter bubbled around the table. Real, not staged. After everyone left, I stepped outside onto the balcony. The night was calm. Wind brushing through the trees. The air thick with summer promise. I leaned against the railing, remembering the girl who once sat in this house. Invisible. The girl who thought being quiet meant being safe. I was wrong. The truth? Being quiet only protects those who benefit from your silence. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't grow you. You build your future one hard decision at a time. One risk, one broken chain, and you forgive, not for them, but for yourself. Because the past can haunt you, or it can teach you how to rise. If you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or cast aside, know this. Your voice is your power, and when you're ready to use it, there's no limit to what you can rebuild. Thank you for taking this journey with me. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a comeback. Drop a comment with your own story, or binge our next one. We've got more twists coming.